I never conceived that a trivial chime could strike my chest with the weight of a thunderhead rupturing silence. Yet it did. A small alert, crystalline and abrupt, rang out like a sanctified bell in an abandoned nave. My grandson's laughter followed, a high, reckless tremor, the kind of mirth only youth can summon when they believe they've stumbled upon a revelation the cosmos itself demands to hear. The device glowed in his grasp. Mine remained on the table, dappled with fractured sunlight bleeding through the blinds. I glimpsed the glint in his eyes before I discerned the words blazing across his screen. By then, the wound was inflicted. If you've wandered here for the first time, pause, subscribe, lend a nod of approval, leave in the comments the moments your own kin blindsided you when you were least prepared. For today's tale is no festival, no commemoration. It is the sudden vanishing of the floor beneath your step, when private truths of bloodline become carnival fodder. I had just replenished my cup, steam coiling upward like forgiving incense into the ruins of another sleepless dawn. My daughter's words still reverberated, sharp, fatigued, already resolved that I was the fulcrum of her unrest. But her echo wasn't the one that hollowed me. His was. Ben, my quiet shadow at the corner of the table. The boy who once begged me to show him the whisper of a faucet's leak, who once slumbered against my shoulder as the highway unwound before us. That boy now spoke to faceless multitudes with a confidence he never gifted me, and they listened. The recording replayed ceaselessly on his palm-sized screen, his accusation looping like evidence in a tribunal I hadn't realized was convened. "Grandpa's been hiding things," he declared. 4 syllables, enough to stain me in unfamiliar hues. The commentary poured in like unbridled floodwater. What's he concealing? Proof or silence? Families always rot with secrets. My impulse was to reach across the table, wrench the device away, and remind him truth is not to be flung skyward like shredded paper at a parade, but I stayed still. I watched as ire and grief coalesced, swirling like cream sinking into midnight coffee. Age renders life a ledger, offerings given, denials withheld, sacrifices unseen. Not ink, but etched in the stoop of a spine worn by labor, in holidays never taken, in the sober dignity of bills quietly settled. Ben knew none of this. He only knew his mother's narrative and the spectacle his screen could project. The irony was bitter. He thought he had unearthed my secret. In truth, he hadn't glimpsed the vault he'd forced ajar. I leaned back, wood groaning beneath my weight, studying his posture, shoulders caved, fingers frantic, eyes chained to the glow. A generation bowed not in reverence, but in perpetual scroll. Once we spoke eye to eye. He had asked when to halt tightening a bolt. When it's firm yet not strained, I told him. A parable of wrenches, but also of souls. Squeeze too hard, they shatter. Leave them loose, they unravel. And here we were too taut in conflict, too slack in kinship. Midway through his video, a phrase jolted me so fiercely I slammed my cup down, coffee spilling over the rim. He mentioned the envelope, the one buried in the bottom drawer of my desk. Bound in rubber, sealed with tape, untouched for years. Not because I had forgotten, but because I wasn't ready for what it carried. My heart surged into my throat. How had he discovered it? In that instant, I knew this was not a child's display for attention. This was the first gust of a storm, and the horizon was dark. I tried to anchor myself, counting breaths in and out, but my mind raged. That envelope was not mere paper. It was a map. A future I had postponed. Decisions deferred. Protection stored away until my absence. And now the world knew. I looked at Ben again. His smile, crooked, uncertain, betrayed the boy beneath the armor. The same boy who once wept over scraped knees, believing I could mend anything. "Why would you do this, Ben?" I asked. My own voice sounded alien, as though spoken through another man. His head jerked up, startled by the rupture of silence. For a moment, I thought he'd relinquish the phone. Instead, he tightened his grip. "Because everyone deserves to know," he said. "Everyone, or merely you craving dominion in a household where you felt powerless." I didn't speak it. Some truths simmer until their moment arrives. The tide of commentary kept rising, brick upon brick of strangers' judgments. Some shielded me, most condemned, irrelevant. What mattered was that Ben had cracked something I could never seal again. That envelope, it would be unsealed sooner than I had foreseen. But not here, not now. So I acted against expectation. I reached for my own device, tapped the screen and pressed record. The camera revealed my face, dimly lit by the kitchen's pallor. "If you think you've heard the whole story," I said evenly, "you're mistaken. Truth is not what you assume. And when the moment arrives, I'll reveal it." I ended the recording, saved it, set it aside. Ben stared, silence shackling him for the first time all day. Because the promise I had uttered was not solely for him. It was for all listening, all watching, all waiting to witness what a father, a grandfather, a man seasoned by decades of unseen sacrifice, would unveil once the seal finally tore. The hush inside a household never lingers long. By dawn, the walls thrummed with an unavoidable clamor. My phone quivered on the nightstand before daylight had fully crept across the blinds, its vibration striking the wood like a furious insect trapped in glass. I groped for it, eyes still fogged, only to be blinded by an avalanche of alerts. Messages, emails, and worst of all, links to that recording. It had multiplied overnight. Ben's face glared from glowing rectangles across the nation, his voice tumbling out of tinny speakers in kitchens and lounges. "Grandpa's been hiding things," he declared with chilling composure, his syllables clipped sharp enough to cut, perfectly crafted for circulation, perfectly made to be believed. I trudged through the corridor, robe cinched, coffee still only a thought. Ellen lingered by the counter, her phone gripped like a talisman. Her gaze rose to mine, clouded with apprehension. "It's everywhere," she murmured. I didn't require her to say it. I could already feel the phantom murmur of strangers, as if their voices seeped through plaster and beams. The web has a way of infiltrating houses until silence itself feels peopled with unseen eyes. Still, I brewed the coffee. Rituals are sometimes the last threads tethering you to sanity. The fragrance drifted familiar, but it couldn't thaw the frost collecting in my chest. By the time I sat, the view count surged past 50,000. Comments unfurled in endless ribbons. "Expose him. Families bury the foulest rot." "Where's the envelope?" My fingers trembled. That word again, envelope. Ben had dropped it with reckless ease or perhaps cunning precision. I tried convincing myself that nameless watchers would forget us soon, swept away by the next spectacle. Yet the calls proved otherwise. First came my brother from Florida, voice hesitant, almost pleading, "Will, is it true?" Then a former colleague, "I saw it, I just don't know what to think anymore." That's the cruelty, 40 years of honor eclipsed by one whispered accusation. Ben ambled down the stairs just then, hair damp, grin smug, the same expression that lit his viral betrayal. He poured cereal as though nothing monumental had shifted. "Do you fathom what you've unleashed?" I asked, voice low. He shrugged. "People deserve honesty. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. The word slapped harder than any hand. Children blind in their righteousness cannot fathom the avalanche their stones set free. He ate with careless crunches, each bite a desecration of memory. I pictured birthdays, quiet suppers, sacred Tuesdays, all stained by this morning. "Ben," I finally breathed, "there are truths you cannot yet carry." His eyes narrowed, spoon stilled midair. "Then teach me." The arrogance of youth, demanding revelation before learning reverence. My throat locked around the envelope's secret. By afternoon, views soared past 100,000. No reporters yet, but inevitability hung heavy. Ellen haunted the window, unraveling as each car passed. "What if they come here?" she whispered. "What if neighbors ask?" I had no reply, only the envelope, still sealed, still waiting. And in that wait came a strange duality. Shame that we'd become fodder for strangers' delight, and relief that perhaps concealment's burden would finally collapse. Secrets curdle in darkness. They do not age like wine but rot like forgotten milk. The chorus online kept hammering, "Open it, show us, prove it." And their demand echoed the restless drum inside me. That night I abandoned sleep. The glow of the phone pulsed like an unblinking eye. Each vibration another reminder the world was watching. So I sat at my desk. The only sound, the metronome tick of the old clock. I slid open the bottom drawer. There it lay, edges yellow, tape brittle, a relic of everything unspoken. My hand shook. I had guarded it for decades, but now its very existence was exposed. You cannot unname a secret once the world knows its shape. I did not open it, not yet. The mere heft of it crushed the air from my lungs. Instead, I positioned the small camera once meant to capture family joys, adjusted the tripod, pressed record. For the first time, I stared into the lens and confessed, yes, the envelope exists. And yes, one day it will open, but not tonight. Tonight, you must endure uncertainty. I cut the feed, sat cloaked in dark, the envelope heavy across my knees like a verdict suspended. Morning arrived, harsher, louder. The video's numbers had doubled. Ellen handed me the phone with trembling hands. You're trending. Trending, such a venomous word, as though our agony were merely entertainment. And yet, under the humiliation, a new iron stirred. Resolve. If this battle was to be fought, it would not be hidden in whispers. I slid the envelope into my jacket. Whatever came next, the telling would be mine. Thus Chapter 2 did not close in quiet but in the relentless roar of the digital hive, demanding revelation, hungrier than any dinner quarrel, more pitiless than any midnight silence. Sooner than later, the seal would surrender. By the time the weekend bled into its gray hours, the hush in our house had ripened into something almost tangible, a weight in the air like damp wool. Ellen drifted from chamber to chamber with the stealth of someone preserving a brittle ceasefire. For me, silence no longer carried the perfume of refuge, it reeked of capitulation. So I reached for the phone. I summoned my daughter, Claire. Bring Michael as well, I said, the syllables catching in my throat. Extending that invitation felt akin to dousing flames with kerosene, yet evasion had already carved this fracture. They arrived under a pewter sky, clouds pressed down as though the heavens themselves crouched over us. The atmosphere outside mirrored the heaviness indoors, a storm brooding not in the weather but in our marrow. We convened in the living room. Once, that space had been an archive of merriment. Pine needles from Christmas, ribbons torn during birthdays, the squeal of Claire unwrapping her dolls, Michael's Lego fortresses stubbornly occupying the carpet. Now it smelled only of stale coffee and unease. Claire folded her arms, her jaw locked. Michael prowled the edges, unable to sit beneath the crackle of tension. "Dad," Claire began, her tone like sharpened glass, "why didn't you tell us about the envelope? You've made us look like jesters." Her words flayed, not because of accuracy, but because of her eagerness to swallow Ben's narrative. My own child siding with the world against her father. "I didn't tell you," I said, measuring each word, "because it wasn't the hour." Michael laughed, brittle and void of warmth. "Not the hour. The whole town hums with it, neighbors, colleagues, even my children's teachers. You ever feel a room fall silent because you walked in?" I studied him. Once the family's jester, the buffer against quarrels, the salve for silence. Now his skin flushed, his jaw stone, his tone steeped in fury. "And do you," I murmured, "comprehend what it means to cradle a truth for decades, fearing a single misstep could sunder us all?" Claire rolled her eyes, dismissive. "Stop with the theatrics, it's just parchment. If it means nothing, prove it, show us, end this." Ellen's eyes burned into me from her chair, her fingers clenched white upon her lap. She would not intervene, she knew this road was mine alone. The envelope seared in my pocket. I could have unleashed it, torn the seal, and let the truth cascade like floodwater through a fractured dam. But instinct balked, not because of secrecy, but because revelation unseasoned can wound deeper than deceit. So I asked, "Who told Ben?" Silence. Michael's glance flickered toward Claire, and in that infinitesimal moment the puzzle locked. My daughter, the one who once curled on my lap for bedtime tales, had surrendered our legacy to a boy with a camera and an audience of strangers. "Do you fathom what you've done?" My voice was quiet, anchored. "You've turned kin into spectacle. You've crowned outsiders as arbiters in a trial they have no right to preside over." Claire's chin jutted higher. Maybe we needed arbiters because you've played judge and hangman long enough. Her accusation bruised more than I expected. Judge, executioner. As if every weary overtime shift, every sacrifice, every denial of comfort had been nothing but tyranny pressed against their throats. Michael halted his pacing, his voice a low thunder. She's right, Dad. You wield everything like a cudgel, money, choices, even now that envelope. No wonder Ben went public. Blood hammered in my temples, hot and merciless. But beneath the rage stirred sorrow, my stewardship mistaken for domination. I rose. The chair screeched against the wood, a blade through the silence. You wish to see it. My hand moved to my pocket. Their eyes locked upon me. I brushed the envelope's edge, its gravity demanding release, then let my hand fall. No, I said. Not this night, not like this. Disappointment swelled, palpable as humidity. Claire flushed crimson, Michael cursed beneath his breath. It might have dissolved into stalemate until the sound came. A knock, 3 deliberate raps clipped and certain. We froze. Ellen's eyes widened, the children's suspicion eclipsing their fury. Another knock, louder. Who is it? Michael barked. Silence answered, heavy, expectant. I moved toward the door, each step an echo in the hush. My palm clasped the brass handle, chill against my skin. I turned it and opened. A man in a dark jacket, microphone poised, a camera team at his flank. Mr. Harris, he said, Channel 7 News, we'd like to ask about the envelope. Behind him, a camera blinked red, an unblinking sentinel. For a heartbeat, breath deserted me. Our private war had erupted into the street. I glanced back, Claire's pallor, Michael's gaping jaw, Ellen's trembling hand upon her lips. The reporter leaned in. Is it true you've hidden your will from your family? The public deserves disclosure. The public, that phrase told like a bell of judgment. My family wasn't merely fractured, it was trending. I shut the door, the latch slamming with the violence of a gunshot. When I turned back, their eyes flared, demanding answers I could not yet yield. And in that suspended silence, I understood. The tempest had not been approaching. It had already set its teeth upon us. The reporter's footsteps had scarcely faded when silence thickened the house. My children's eyes trailed me, questions unspoken, but none dared sever the fragile thread holding me intact. At the corridor's farthest end waited my study, a sanctum concealed behind a door that swelled obstinately in winter. Tonight, its resistance felt deliberate, as though even wood recoiled from the reckoning inside. I forced it open, entered, and turned the lock. The air clung with the musk of dust and aged leather, remnants of tomes, neglected files, and the faint specter of tobacco long extinguished. Here time loosened its grip. The clock's tick was not a demand but a whisper, patient, unyielding, eternal. I lowered myself to the oak desk, its surface etched with the scars of decades, bills tallied, letters penned, whiskey spilled. My hand, moved by instinct, reached for the bottom drawer. It groaned in protest as if complicit in concealing truths. And there it lay, the envelope, edges browned by years, tape brittle with age, my name scrawled in a hand not my own, Ellen's, before sickness unraveled her graceful script. I traced the curves of her writing. Ellen had known of its existence, she helped me seal it. Our children, though they were never meant to shoulder its gravity until the hour was right. I set it on the desk, paper yet heavy as stone. Surrounding it were stacks of life's dull evidence, insurance, mortgages, taxes, all the banal affirmations of a man who obeyed rules. Yet this single envelope eclipsed them all. Claire's words echoed in memory. Stop making this dramatic, it's just paper. Just paper, how little she grasped. I pushed aside the clutter and unearthed a photograph. Claire, 6 years old, pigtails swinging, toothless grin, standing proud beside the treehouse I had hammered together. She had painted the latter pink. Streaks of that color still bled through in the background. My throat cinched tight. How could that child morph into the stern woman beyond these walls, demanding answers like a magistrate? Another folder emerged, bound by a brittle band. Receipts spilled out, school supplies, braces, ballet lessons. Ledgers of sacrifice. Every overtime shift, every holiday forfeited, every journey never taken, all transformed into proof inked on yellowing slips. A parent's silent accounting. The shuffle of paper resounded louder than it should have in the cloistered quiet. Each slip of parchment whispered of devotion misinterpreted as control, of care mistaken for concealment. A knock shattered the stillness. "Dad," Claire's voice filtered through the wood. "People online are saying more. You can't ignore this." I shut my eyes, photograph clutched tight. For a fleeting moment, I imagined opening the door, surrendering the envelope, letting its contents scatter like ash upon the living room table. But the vision dissolved. They were unprepared. Perhaps I was too. I remained silent. Her footsteps retreated, leaving me swaddled in the study's oppressive hush. My gaze returned to the envelope. I lifted the tape. Its brittle crack made me shiver. One more pull and its seal would yield. Yet I faltered. Instead, I reached for an old journal. Its pages bore faded ink, chronicles of youthful dreams and hidden doubts. I turned until I found the entry. The day Ellen and I first drafted the envelope's contents. I could still see her face, resolute, weary, insisting protection mattered more than sentiment. "If we don't do this," she had warned, "we leave them not a gift but a weapon." The memory stilled me. She was right. Inheritance unguided curdles into venom. Affection without guardrails hardens into leverage. My fingers traced her handwriting again, grooves pressed deep by the weight of her pen. She was there still, steadying me, whispering resolve. Outside, voices swelled, not my children's this time, but from the street. I parted the curtain. Vans lined the curb, satellites jutting skyward. Reporters loitered, cameras poised. A neighbor lingered with feigned errands, her gaze locked on my home. Privacy had become spectacle. My study no longer refuge, but cell. I let the curtain fall. The envelope remained, staring back like an unanswered question. Perhaps the world was right. Perhaps the hour of concealment had expired. Before I could reach, my phone chimed. A message. "Dad, if you don't tell them, I will." Ben, my gut clenched. My grandson, once wide-eyed for guidance, now poised to trade legacy for attention. He mistook the envelope for a weapon, never knowing it could wound him most. I surveyed the desk, photograph, receipts, journal, envelope. Artifacts of sacrifice, of devotion misunderstood. To them, nothing more than fodder for headlines. The clock told 8, each strike a verdict. I slid the photo back, stowed the receipts, closed the journal. The envelope lingered in my hand, heavier than flesh, heavier than truth. "Not tonight," I murmured into emptiness. But soon. I tucked it inside my jacket, rose, and felt resolve settle within me like steel. If revelation was inevitable, it would arrive by my hand, never theirs. Morning's glare descended with the cruelty of a tribunal. It streamed through the blinds like interrogation beams, slashing pale ribbons across the kitchen tiles where Ellen lingered, bare feet rooted, her tea untouched, cooling into stillness. Beyond the walls, the low thrum of engines fused with a chorus of murmurs. Reporters had not vanished with the night. They had multiplied like weeds. What began as a lone van had sprouted into a metallic grove of 4, antennae jutting skyward like skeletal trees. Their shadows crept across our lawn, foreign and uninvited. This street, my refuge for 35 years, had once been nothing but ordinary. Children pedaling bicycles, neighbors tipping their hats, the postman whistling a careless tune. Now it resembled a front line, a place besieged. I tugged the curtains shut, but sound seeped through like water through stone. The mechanical chatter of shutters, the insect-like whine of cameras, and the sudden cry of my name. "Will," one voice split the air. "What's in the envelope?" The word clung to the siding, burrowed beneath the door, and hovered in the silence like an accusation. Ellen's hands quivered as she lifted her cup, her voice breaking into a whisper. "We can't endure this." She spoke truth. Privacy, once fractured, cannot be stitched whole. The phone shrilled again. I let the machine answer. Strangers' voices infiltrated the room. "Mr. Harris, Channel 4, give us your account." "This is the Herald, our readers demand clarity." "Channel 7 again, without your word we'll run it regardless." Ellen pressed her palms over her ears. "Make it stop." How I longed to. But curiosity in the public eye has no switch, no mercy. It feeds upon itself, louder with each hour. By midday, our neighbors bore the burden. Mrs. Patterson complained of her blocked drive. The Henderson children could no longer play ball in the cul-de-sac. Shame seared me. We had become that house, spoken of in whispers, avoided by parents guiding their children past. I considered stepping outside, declaring misunderstanding. Yet how could I unveil to strangers what I had not confessed to my own blood? The phone rattled once more, this time Claire. "Dad," she said, breathless, "they're hounding me too. Reporters, friends, even my boss. Everyone's asking what's inside the envelope." Her voice broke. For all her fury, she was still my daughter, snared in the storm I had birthed. "Say nothing," I told her. "They think you're hiding a monstrosity." "Perhaps I am," I answered, honesty weighing heavier than denial. Silence spread like a shroud between us. Night brought chance. A cluster of strangers brandished crude placards. "Show the papers. Open the envelope." Their rhythm mocked protest songs, echoing cruelly off the bricks of our home. Ellen folded in upon herself on the couch, shoulders rounded like stone worn by rain. I stood at the window, fists hard, listening as they clamored for what they had not earned. In my mind, I heard Ben's voice, smug, unrelenting, spreading embers until the entire block burned. I retreated to the study, clutching the envelope against my chest as though it were a second heartbeat. The pulse inside me thundered through the paper. At the desk, I whispered into the emptiness, "Do I tear you open or let them destroy us first?" I pictured its contents. Brittle contracts, yellowed letters, testimony of choices Ellen and I carved decades past. Testimony why inheritance could not be squandered as a blank coin purse. But secrecy in shadows no longer sufficed. The mob outside would not relent until I faced the storm. Realization arrived not like lightning but like dawn. My creed had always been quietude: work hard, pay debts, raise children steady. I thought silence was a shield. But noise does not wait for your invitation, it chooses you. So I resolved, if there must be a narrative, it will be mine. I drew the laptop close, its blue glow carved hollows across the room. Fingers hovered, hesitant, then began. "My name is William Harris. For weeks, rumors have circled an envelope in my care. Before you feed on speculation, you deserve my truth." Words spilled, hesitant at first, then urgent. Not everything, never all, but enough to seize my voice back. The chants outside pounded on, yet Ellen appeared in the doorway, her face pale yet fierce. "What are you doing?" "Reclaiming control. If you begin, there's no return. There's no return already." Her silence bore either consent or resignation. Marriage often blurs the two. I envisioned the scene already, myself at this desk, the envelope plain before me, camera unembellished. No theatrics, just truth. Not every truth, not yet, but enough to show I was not a villain of someone else's cheap melodrama. Enough to show my children their father still had iron in his spine. The choice steadied me. My trembling ceased. I lifted the envelope, whispered, "Soon, on my terms." Ellen's hand rested on my shoulder once before withdrawing, and when I peered again through the glass, the crowd no longer loomed as giants. Their chants shrank to echoes, stripped of power, because the decision was no longer theirs. It was mine. And come tomorrow, the world would not hear the voice of reporters or neighbors or a reckless grandson. It would hear me. I lingered until the horizon bruised with dawn. Sleep had long abandoned me, so I stayed in the study, a dim lamp smoldering above the desk, waiting for the gray hush of morning to bleed through the blinds. The street beyond the glass seemed deserted, subdued in a way it hadn't been for weeks. Reporters slumped in their vans, some collapsed in uneasy naps, others scrolling with fevered thumbs, awaiting some signal to pounce. Placards leaned like forgotten soldiers against the curbside, their slogans reduced to shadowy smears in the fog. It felt less like a neighborhood, more like the lull before a siege. I arranged the tripod on the desk, twisted the lens. My old camcorder woke with a mechanical sigh, its standby light blinking like a pulse. Once it had captured birthdays, graduations, laughter. Tonight it would harvest something heavier. The envelope lay in front of me, its silence louder than any chant outside. I placed my palms on either side, the way one braces a wheel before a perilous turn. I rehearsed breathing, measured, deliberate. The same cadence used in hospital corridors when bearing news no one wants to receive. When the record button clicked, the faint whir filled the silence. "My name is William Harris," I said, my voice rougher, more hollow than I expected. "You've seen the whispers, you've read the speculations. None of it mine. Tonight I speak for myself." I paused, glancing at the envelope. My reflection in the lens looked older than the man I believed myself to be, creased, weary-eyed, perhaps appropriate. The truth is never young, it ages in secret until the weight shows. "This envelope," I continued, raising it gently, "is not a blade. It is a record, one your mother and I created to guard what we built. It is stitched with devotion, not avarice, with duty, not dominion." The words spilled easier than I imagined. I spoke of sacrifices unremarked, decisions hidden like roots beneath soil, the instinct of parents to shield children until the time is merciful. I withheld the contents, yet left no doubt that the frenzy online was a distorted echo of reality. When I finished, I let the hush linger, then leaned forward, silencing the machine. The red light dimmed, the whir withered. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without feeling hunted. I was seconds from uploading when the knock arrived. Not the hammering of reporters, softer, almost fragile. "Dad," Claire's voice. I stilled. She knocked again. "I know you're in there, please." Against instinct, I opened the door. She entered, yesterday's clothes still clinging, her hair pulled back in haste, her eyes bruised with fatigue. Her gaze fell at once on the envelope. "You recorded it, didn't you?" I stayed mute. She stepped closer, voice low. "If you release that, you'll shatter what remains of us." I bristled. "And what have you and your brother been doing?" "Ben fed me to the mob for clicks. Reporters swarmed like vultures. You demanded answers as though I were a stranger, and now you speak of ruin." Her chin quivered. "I didn't know he'd drag it that far. I only thought," she bit her lip. "You thought what?" I pressed. "That you'd finally have to tell us." Her words scorched. Anger rumbled, but beneath it coiled recognition. She was right. Secrets decay when entombed too long. Still, bitterness cut deep. "The truth is no toy, Claire, no bargaining chip. Your mother and I crafted it for the moment when revelation would heal, not harm." Her eyes lingered on the envelope. "Then maybe this is that moment." Her words hovered like a knife, tempting, perilous. The landline rang, shrill and alien in our wireless age. Ellen's voice answered in the hall, then her sharp intake of breath. She appeared pale, stricken. "It's Michael," she whispered. "He's at the hospital." The world tilted. What happened? Chest pains, collapse at work. Claire's hand clamped her mouth. In that instant, all the rancor dissolved. She was only my daughter again, frightened for her brother. I seized my coat. The envelope stayed behind, a shadow on the desk. "Leave it," Ellen murmured. "Come." But as we left, I felt its absence burn my pocket. The hospital bathed everything in cold fluorescence. Machines sang in different rhythms. Michael lay tethered, pale, his chest sprouting wires like roots from fragile earth. "Dad," he rasped, brittle as glass, "this was never about money." His voice cracked me open, because I knew shamefully that part of it always had been inheritance, legacy, the calculus of provision. Yet watching him, there shifted the axis. The envelope seemed less like salvation, more like a wedge cleaving us apart. That night back in the study, the camera still blinked in readiness. But my finger froze. I could not upload, not while Michael lay fighting, not while Claire's eyes carried unspoken pleas. I slid the envelope into a drawer, closed it with a click that felt heavier than stone. Outside, the mob still waited. Their chants rose, demanding spectacle. But inside, the fracture of my family thundered louder than any crowd. The recording remained unsent. The truth, half-born, suspended, awaited a day when its unveiling would mend rather than maim. Whether that day would arrive, I could not say. Only this I knew: the storm had not passed. It had only changed its shape. The sterility of hospitals has a way of disarming even the most iron-willed. I had crossed those mechanical doors countless times. Broken bones, blood tests, Ellen's procedure years back. Yet on that night when Michael's name blazed on the admission board, the atmosphere thickened. Each sigh, each shuffle bore the gravity of unfinished petitions to heaven. The elevator's crawl to the third floor unfolded in silence. Claire stood tense, arms folded, gnawing her lip until it nearly bled. Ellen clutched her handbag like a relic, murmuring prayers I hadn't heard from her tongue since our children were small. When the doors split open, antiseptic fumes struck with merciless clarity. A nurse ushered us along, her rubber soles whispering against linoleum. At the corridor's far end, Michael awaited, propped against snow-white pillows, his skin drained of color, his eyes shadowed. Still, he summoned a fragile smile. "Dad," he rasped, voice barely more than air. I dragged a chair close. "You gave us quite a fright." His thin chuckle dissolved into a cough. "Frightened myself too." Machines pulsed like mechanical heartbeats. Clear liquid seeped into veins that once hurled baseballs across fields and lifted boxes into the attic. The sight of my son bound to wires and lights felt grotesque, almost unreal. Claire perched on the mattress, smoothing his hair. "The doctors said it wasn't cardiac. Stress, dehydration, blood pressure gone haywire." Michael closed his eyes. "Stress, that's one word for it." Something in his gaze warned me this was not about the envelope. "What kind of strain, son?" I pressed. A pause, his eyes flicked to Claire, then anchored back on me. At last, "Dad, there's more about me." The envelope locked in my study shrank to insignificance. "I'm drowning in debt," he confessed. "Not scraps of bills, business loans, hundreds of thousands." The words fell like stones into deep water. Ellen gasped. Claire froze. Michael's voice slowed, weighed down. "I thought I could manage it quietly. Pride can strangle a man. I didn't want to become another dependent child." The confession crushed against my chest. My diplomat son, my conciliator, silently sinking while we quarreled over legacies. Claire's voice trembled. "Why not tell me?" He turned toward her. "Because you already fight your own wars. I wouldn't add mine." The bitter irony scorched me. We had roared over scandals, yet gagged ourselves on truths that mattered most. I thought of that envelope, once symbol of avarice, now a mere footnote beside my son's ruin. Yet still, its contents could heal or obliterate. Michael clutched my hand, weak yet intent. "Whatever becomes of that envelope, know I wasn't trying to wound you. I only wanted to mend what I broke, and I failed." I longed to tell him that failing was part of living, that every stumble bore dignity, but the words jammed in my throat. Instead, I pressed his hand. "You should have trusted me." His tears gleamed. "I know." Later, when physicians pronounced him stable, I drifted into the courtyard. Night air chilled my skin, cut grass lingered faintly. The city skyline blinked indifferently. Claire followed. "You're thinking about the envelope," she said. I nodded. "If it holds accounts money, it could save him," she urged. Her logic cut sharp, but she misunderstood. The envelope was no mere cache of funds. It was a fortress, a safeguard against the endless spiral of need. "Do you think opening it would save him?" I asked. Her jaw set. "Wouldn't you?" The truth, I had no answer. That envelope had been shield and sword. Now perhaps it was a key to redemption or ruin. When we finally returned home, Ellen slumped pale against the glass. Claire sat wordless, eyes lost in her phone's glow. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as the headlights tunneled through night. At every red light, I saw the envelope in my mind. Michael's confession, the vultures circling. Reporters lurked by the lawn, their shadows twitching. One shouted, "Mr. Harris, is it true your son collapsed from stress over the envelope?" The cruelty struck like a fist. I gave no reply. Inside, I slammed the door, wood shuddering. In the study once more, the envelope rested in my hand. But now, it was not only my children clamoring for answers. It was existence itself. The dawn after Michael's collapse, the house became a cathedral of silence, brittle, echoing, as if each sound might fracture the walls. Even Ellen's ritual of coffee felt like an unfinished gesture, the cup abandoned untouched. Claire drifted from room to room, her voice tethered to a phone, whispering like a shadow in league with secrets. I lingered in the study, the envelope a constant gravity at my side. By midday, the summons arrived. Not the voracious press this time, but kin. Claire barged through the door, her tote slung heavy on one shoulder, urgency sparking in her gaze. Behind her came Michael, gaunt and diminished, a cane his reluctant companion. The hospital band still clung to his wrist, a stark reminder of fragility. Yet despite his weakness, his presence bore weight. He had come to claim something. "Dad," Claire began, shutting out the corridor behind her, "we can't orbit this forever. It's shattering us." Michael sank into the chair opposite, the motion stealing breath from him. His fingers clenched the cane, eyes fixed on the envelope between us like it was a detonator waiting for a spark. "You must open it," Claire urged. "For Michael, for all of us." The air itself thinned. I shook my head. "This envelope wasn't meant for daylight dragged by scandal. Your mother and I crafted it for after we were gone, not as spectacle for gossip." Michael's lips quirked into something resembling a smile, yet hollow. "Dad, it wasn't gossip that put me in that hospital bed. It was strain. And this secret, it weighs more than my body can bear. I can't live strangled by speculation." His voice cracked, a plea cloaked in demand. I turned toward Claire, her arms folded, yet her eyes glimmered. "There is no perfect moment. The press will not relent. Ben will not retract. And Michael," her voice wavered, "Michael may not have time to wait." Those words struck like steel. Not of time. His failing health wielded now as argument, wrapped in urgency, daring me to resist. I rose, pacing the floor. The wood beneath my steps groaned like weary bones. For decades I had answered every storm, but now my silence was branded cruelty. "You think truth is a bomb," I said, halting. "But truth can carve deeper wounds." Michael leaned forward, voice raw. "Then let it carve. Better a clean cut than 1,000 leaks." I faltered. His words carried a weight that surprised me, hard-won wisdom carved into him by suffering. For an instant, I did not see a frail son but a man staring at the edge of his mortality, begging release. I returned to the desk, hand tracing Ellen's faded script on the envelope. The silence pressed, even the clock ticked cautiously, afraid to intrude. Claire's phone shuddered. She glanced, then turned it face down, but not before I glimpsed a headline. "Harris family scandal deepens. Hospital visit tied to inheritance mystery." So it had begun, the outside world already forging its own sordid tale, indifferent to truth. When I lifted my eyes, they were both watching me, not as children, but as supplicants. "If I break this seal," I said, "everything shifts. There will be no return." Michael nodded, slow and solemn. "Then let it shift." Claire's voice steadied. "We're ready, but readiness can be a mask." My thumb slid beneath the brittle tape when another voice severed the silence. "Stop, Ellen." She stood in the doorway, pale but resolute, her gaze aflame. "You believe opening it will heal," she said, "but it will only feed them, our children, the press, the whole ravenous world. Once opened, it no longer belongs to us, it belongs to them." Claire snapped back, sharp. "Mom, you don't see it. This secret is killing us." Ellen moved forward, resting her hand upon my shoulder, steady as stone. "It is not the secret, child. It is the terror of losing control. That is the poison." Her touch anchored me. I lowered the envelope. Michael sagged, shoulders sinking as if the last threads of strength unraveled. Claire's jaw tight and fury trembling at the edges. "So that's it," she whispered, bitter. "You'll watch us suffocate." Ellen's gaze held hers. "Better a suffocation that passes than a drowning without end." The silence swelled again, dense and merciless. Michael finally pierced it, his voice hushed. "If you won't open it, Dad, promise me one thing." "What is it?" I asked. "Don't let them," his glance shifted toward the windows where cameras prowled, "script our story for us. If truth emerges, it must come from your lips." His words nested deep, heavier than the envelope itself. I looked at them both, my daughter's fury, my son's fragility, and felt the precipice beneath us. "I promise," I murmured. It was not their desired answer, but it was the only one I could offer. That night, alone in the study, the envelope still lay sealed. Outside, the clamor of voices rose, demanding spectacle. Inside, silence weighed heavier. Between them both, I stood like a man resisting a flood with bare hands. By the close of that week, the avenue no longer bore the warmth of belonging. Journalists had unfolded their aluminum chairs in orderly rows, like courtiers awaiting spectacle. Broadcast vans crouched along the curb, generators muttering ceaselessly through daylight and dusk. Neighbors who once exchanged casual nods now scurried by, gaze lowered, as though proximity itself might stain them with scandal. Even the postman balked, abandoning envelopes at the fringe of the yard, unwilling to mount the steps toward our door. The dwelling that once sheltered us had been transfigured into a stage. On Saturday morning, I discovered a pamphlet affixed to the mailbox, in thick, accusatory print. "What is Harris concealing? We demand the truth." I crushed the paper in my fist, the thrum of blood roaring in my ears. The circus was no longer confined to the press. Interlopers, ignorant of us yet ravenous for drama, had joined the chase like sharks tasting iron in the tide. Inside, Ellen lingered at the sink, her gaze hollow through the glass. "They're chanting again," she murmured. I listened. Indeed, the chorus had risen, synchronized with the weekend throng. "Unseal the envelope, show the truth." Each cry reverberated like a war drum against my ribs. I longed to shout back, to proclaim that truth was not theirs to demand, but before breath gathered, the sharp report of glass shattered the air. We froze. In the parlor, a jagged stone sprawled upon the rug, shards glittering like frost around it. A note, scribbled with crude strokes of black ink, dangled from the projectile. "You cannot hide forever." Ellen's gasp cut the silence, her palm clamped to her lips. A chill more sinister than fury seized me, fear. The clamor outside had trespassed our walls. I seized the phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers, recounting vandalism, harassment, the mob beyond our fence. The operator's voice remained even, yet one phrase cleaved cold into me. "You're not the first call about this address." Not the first. Our torment had become routine amusement. Patrol cars arrived after 20 interminable minutes, blue strobes painting the walls. Officers dispersed the rabble, scribbled reports, yet their sidelong smirks betrayed the truth. To them, we were a spectacle. One officer hefted the stone, shrugging. "Could be kids, could be imitators. Either way, best think about relocating." Relocating. As if decades of life could be packed into cardboard and abandoned. When their taillights faded, the silence pressed heavier than the uproar. That evening, Claire burst through the door, cheeks flushed by the icy air. "Dad, this is madness. You saw what happened. This won't stop." Michael entered slower, leaning against his cane. "She's right. You think you're shielding us, but you're feeding the flames." Both their gazes darted toward the study, the resting place of the envelope. I shook my head. I refused to bow to strangers with cameras. "This isn't capitulation," Claire flared. "It's survival." Her voice fractured, and behind her fury lay desperation. Michael sank into a chair, breath ragged. "Father, I nearly died last week. Do you comprehend? While I lay in that bed, all I thought was how everything we've built, our family, this house, your legacy, was unraveling because of one sealed envelope. One." He coughed, then softer. "Perhaps unsealing it won't heal, but keeping it sealed is killing us." His words carved through me like shards of glass. I paced, hand clawing through my hair. For weeks I had stood as the bulwark, holding back the tide. Yet now even Ellen's silence resembled surrender. She sat on the couch's edge, eyes lowered, fingers twisting fabric. Finally she whispered, "Will, maybe it's time." I halted. Ellen, my anchor, was now urging release. The room tilted. My world, once solid, trembled like a pane about to splinter. I strode into the study. They followed, their footfalls heavy as gravestones. The envelope gleamed under the lamp, its brittle paper luminous, taunting. I lifted it. My thumb traced the seam. My heart thundered, drowning sound. Their eyes pierced me, my children, my wife, and perhaps unseen lenses beyond the window. I tugged at the seal, and stopped. Through the wall came another noise, a door closing, footsteps crossing the porch. Then a voice, firm and resonant, addressing the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," it declared, "I have revelations about the Harris family." I froze, envelope still in hand. Whoever he was, he spoke with ownership, as though his truth eclipsed mine. Claire pulled the curtain, her complexion blanching. "It's Ben," she whispered, "my grandson, our betrayer. He stood on the porch, streaming live, his words echoing through every microphone, every loudspeaker, every neighbor's ear. And in that instant, I knew. The envelope was no longer the sole secret in jeopardy. Ben's words thundered through plaster and timber as though the walls themselves had become loudspeakers, his voice wired into the marrow of the house. "Everyone's hounding me about the envelope," he declared, cell phone lifted like a torch, blue screen casting a youthful glow. "Well, since my grandfather won't, I will. He's hoarding money, maybe millions, while the rest of us scrape and starve." The mob outside erupted, applause turning feral. Microphones stabbed forward, neighbors leaned like reeds in a storm. Then came the chant, sharp as a blade. "Open it, open it, open it." My fingers constricted around the envelope. Fragile paper resisted, brittle yet alive, whispering that it had waited too long in the shadows. Claire turned from the window, pallid as ash. "Dad, he's lying. Don't let him twist this." Michael struggled upright, knuckles whitening on his cane. "He's playing our tricks, only filthier. Stay silent now and you'll lose the tale forever." Ellen's eyes caught mine, sorrow welded to resolve. She said nothing, yet I heard her clearly. The hour had arrived. Not tomorrow, not later, now. I carried the envelope to the front door. The porch light carved a circle into the shouting dark. The moment the door groaned open, silence plummeted like a dropped curtain. Cameras froze, phones stilled, every gaze tethered to me. Ben faltered mid-sentence. His grin cracked, brittle as porcelain. "Grandpa," he offered, feigned surprise dripping. "Want to confess yourself?" I stepped past him. The porch groaned under my weight. I waited, letting the hush stretch until even seasoned reporters shifted in discomfort. "This envelope," I said, holding it aloft, "has spawned more fables than truths. Tonight I end that." The crowd leaned closer as one organism, stalks bending toward wind. "It is not millions. It is no secret fortune. It is a design, a covenant your grandmother and I forged long ago, meant to shield this family from what you now see: avarice, fracture, manipulation." I tore the seal. The rip echoed, papers spilled, quivering in my grip. "This is a trust. Every penny we saved, every sacrifice carved from bone, is not for children to squander, but for grandchildren to forge futures. Education, craft, tools, not scraps for quarreling." Gasps rippled like stones in water. Pens scratched madly. I turned on Ben. His skin leached color. And here I raised a page, the ledger of every dollar you leached, every gift, every bailout. You never suffered, Ben, you feasted. He stammered, syllables jagged. "I know that's not." I shook my head. "You sought views, not veracity. Truth needs no followers, it stands solitary." The press pivoted, cameras now feasting on me. Voices volleyed, "Mr. Harris, why bury this secret? Do you regret silence?" "Regret?" My voice cut steady. "Yes, concealment birthed suspicion. Yet I will not regret honoring my wife's wishes or guarding a legacy for mine, not indulgence." Facing the lenses, I spoke plain. Family is no cash machine. Inheritance is no trophy for deceit, and affection cannot be tallied in coins. The words lingered, dense as smoke. For the first time in months, I stood taller, freed of the weight that had bent me earthward. Ben's phone lowered. The stream died with a muted click. The press clamored. Neighbors murmured, but I no longer cared. The truth had escaped parchment, it breathed. I shut the door deliberately. Ellen waited, tears flowing quiet as rain. Behind her, Claire and Michael wavered between shame and shock. Michael whispered, "Dad, I didn't know." "No," I replied, softer than a reprimand, "you didn't want to. None of you did, but now you do. And what you choose next will decide if we remain a family or merely kin by blood." The room throbbed with silence. Only the old clock ticked, steady, relentless. Once it had sounded like a countdown, tonight it told like a genesis. I set the opened envelope on the mantel beside the long-shamed family photo. This time I placed it upright. Our smiles, trapped in silvered glass, caught lamplight again. "From here on," I murmured, "the story is ours." Outside, the crowd dissolved. Reporters folded gear, neighbors slipped away. The battered house breathed in its quiet. I sank beside Ellen. Her hand found mine firm, anchoring. Peace seeped in, not the hollow quiet of surrender, but the fierce calm of survival. For sometimes the blade that severs lies is the same blade that sutures truth, and only by cutting deep can a family begin to mend. Did this tale strike a chord with you? Share your thoughts below. Tap like, subscribe for more chronicles of kinship, sacrifice, and the unseen burdens we bear. Until next time,